Hi everyone, welcome to today's Transformation Talk. I'm here today with Kiran, Mystic Girl in the City. She is a spiritual teacher and a dear friend of mine for the last 20 years. And I'm so glad you're here today, Kiran. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to be with you. It's always such a joy to be with you, actually. Thank you.
Thank you. So we went to theater school together 20 years ago, and we have been in and out of each other's lives since then.
We lived up in the Yukon together.
Yeah,
we were roommates together.
Yeah, so there's a lot of history there. And about 8 or 9 years ago, I remember I was up in Vancouver and we were visiting, and you began to tell me about this experience you'd had, which was a massive spontaneous awakening. And it sounded both amazing and terrifying.
It was so fun because at that time, it's so beautiful actually to be able to share that with you because you were there with me as it was just beginning to unfold. And as you know, I had no background for anything like this. It's not like we read all these spiritual enlightenment texts and we had this story that this is what we wanted, or this, like it was just like there was no context whatsoever. It was just so spontaneous. And you had just gotten married and you were in Vancouver and we were in my apartment and we went for a walk down to the beach, and it's awesome to recall it because again, it was like 8 years ago, 8.5 years ago. And, yeah, I remember trying to describe to you like what had happened, but not having any context or any vocabulary, and just trying, I'm at this stage of the game, I'm much more functional, but even then when you were in Vancouver, it was just the beginning of that complete dissolve, which basically, what happened was weeks before you had come, I had just come home, was sitting on my bed changing shoes to go out to the next activity. And I remember as I was tying my shoes, looking at my body and watching it just turn into, the first layer was just light, was just like shimmery golden light. And it was like, there was no surprise. It was really simple. And it was like, wow, our bodies are so beautiful. we don't take enough time to notice how beautiful our bodies really are. And then as I was sort of watching this light, I remember like looking up into the wall, and the wall just became pure energy, but not sort of visibly. It was more like, visibly as well, but more was this, it was like this thing, this very, very deep intuitive feeling, which prior, being an artist and being a creator and the lifestyle made me a really intuitive person. But this is like an entirely different ballgame. Like that times 10,000 sort of like is basically all of the sense organs like sight and smell and taste are like 2% comparatively to what you're actually moving from, which is this visceral, intuitive feeling about everything, which is basically becoming the same energy and receiving energy and primarily moving like this. And it was sort of like maybe somewhere within a few minutes later, it was like my mind blew a fuse. Like it started to sort of tell itself, and it was like the mind just went pop and blew. And without the filter of the mind, everything that we know from basic science, but also through the study of quantum physics, that everything is energy. Everything is atoms and protons moving through space. And it's actually the mind that's turning that pure energetic information into a wall or a body or, a computer or whatever is here is just at its basic core level. And then, but it dissolved even past that. So at that time, 8 years ago when we were talking, I still wasn't even quite at the energetic field. Like it sort of was this instant pop of the mind. Everything just became its pure codedness, its pure energeticness. But then even past that was its pure source, which is just this vast, massive field of stillness and silence. And that's what I was. And there was this, at that time, it's this unbelievable kind of like rude awakening of like, I'm no different than a wall. Like, I'm not actually a separate, I'm not human. I'm not a person. I'm a vast field of silence coming into form, which is like so wildly, I mean, talk about pull the rug out from under you. Like, you know, our basic fundamental assumptions of reality being trumped for such a deeper reality in this sort of spontaneous moment for me.
So and what happened with that? Like, tell me what it felt like. Like, what did your body, you said everything dissolved. Can you give us what did it feel like in your body to have that happen?
You know, I couldn't feel a body. That was the primary piece. I could energetically sense there was a body, but it didn't have any of the same sensations. So it was like something as basic as hunger was so far away. And it was more like just information, but I had to read the information to know it was hunger. Or even pain, because I actually broke my knee about 4 days later. And I knew there was a radiation of a specific kind of energy, but it took me a long time to be able to read the energy to know it was pain. Because so there wasn't a sensation of pain or hunger or any of the sensations that we have. I couldn't even really find the body. It was like, but it was very heartbreaking because I knew there was a body and I knew bodies needed things. And to try to attend to it was so hard, was so, you know, it was like the whole mind blew, and after the mind blew, there was like access to so much more information, but all of it, all of it basically deep stillness kind of moved. What it felt like was there's total vast stillness. The vast stillness has a movement. And the movement is actually what we feel and know as love. That's what that movement is. The first form of the entire universe is love. And love itself moves, and it becomes energy. And energetic movement forms, walls and stories like this. And the mind is what's filtering that movement of energy into different shapes. And then the mind, of course, has many, many layers of doing that, because you and I can look and both see a wall. But then we've got this psychological story or virtual reality of like, you know, this is a wall at my house, you know, and that's a wall at your house. And then, you know, all these different psychological layers and layers of storytelling that the mind is filtering. So it wasn't even that my mind was filtering off of the storytelling, right? It was filtering, it was just completely blue. Because sometimes when people talk about awakenings, you know, there's a very vague description. It's a very vague description of what it is, and people have huge gamuts of it. So my definition is very, very specific, and it's that complete blast of which everything dissolves, and dissolves permanently. So because it never came back. I never got the mind back. So
how do you learn to function in the everyday world? Like, how do you feed yourself and make money? And
you eventually learn to read code. Is kind of the short answer to it. So,
like the Matrix.
It's incredibly like the Matrix. Okay. Like there's no war and there's no machines and there's no like all that whole, that's the psychological storytelling. But there's so many moments of the Matrix that are just like in this, when he drives by and he looks at the noodle house and says, I used to eat noodles there. It's like that. You know, I used to be a human and I would go to the store and eat noodles. And now all it is vast, vast fields of information. And I'm reading it to get to form. And so 8 years later, I'm incredibly good at reading stuff. But the thing that's unique about it is I'm reading from the inside out. So if someone's in front of me that's having a problem with something, I can actually see where it's sourcing. So I'm not like a therapist or something that has to read from the outside in. I'm inside reading out of your code to see what's happening. So I'm looking at belief systems and historical patterns and DNA structures and to see you. In order for me to see you, that's what I'm filtering. But it's not even like I'm filtering because there's not me anymore. It's that this vast field of silence that I am is actually coding and reading things. So I never got the mind back. The filter didn't come back. But it becomes just the way it's moving, as in this moment, there's words coming out, the same for you. When we have a mind, we think we're doing that, and we think it's coming from a thought that you've put together to tell a story. That none of that's actually true. Like there's no difference between you and I, except that there's when we have minds, when I used to have a mind, I had a whole kind of way of filtering and understanding. So really, that's all that left, because what's animating you and breathing you and living you and receiving is exactly the same as me. Mm-hmm. And there's actually no difference. I mean, that's the thing about oneness. There's no difference between you and I, mm-hmm. except this one woke up from the dream and that one's dreaming. Mm-hmm. But it's other than, which is a very, very small detail, actually.
Hmm. So it's interesting you talk about reading the code and seeing the beliefs and all of that, because you came from a very, like a really traumatic life. And I remember,
very violent, very traumatic.
Remember you talking about how much grief there was in this process of your mind blowing a fuse, and it's like you died to yourself.
Well, you definitely die. I mean, that's definitely my personal definition of enlightenment. You die. And it's not beautiful and emancipating, and it's not the story of endless bliss, which it's so innocent to tell that story about enlightenment, because when you get deep realizations, like when the veils drop, whether it drops as deeply as mine did or little bits, what happens is a veil or two can drop, and there's such a delicious, unbelievable, expansive clarity that just feels really great. And it's so easy to project that's enlightenment. Enlightenment is just that experience forever, and it's not. That's what a realization feels like. And people have many, many realizations, and some of them last for years and some of them last for months, and they're beautiful and wonderful. But the actual enlightenment is profoundly traumatic, bloody, horrifying. Your life falls apart, as in completely falls apart. You lose your entire family and all connect. I mean, it's your death. That it's true, because the whole story that I am a person with a history and a family and a background and ambitions and a job. I mean, it dissolved in a second. And the only time that most of us will experience that is on our deathbed, which is actually the definition of dying. That's what dying is. So my death, so the irony is that my body didn't drop. Usually the body drops away, but my body didn't drop away, but I died. So then I had this which is what enlightened people have to do, the horrifying experience of living your own death. And it's a slow and thorough process, because there's still kind of this sort of story, because it was so quick and it was so instant and everything wiped away. But I had a habit of living, of being this person, but nothing was there to kind of grip and create it again. But those habits slowly unwind, and it's very thorough. And then in my case, just as you said, I had so much trauma and so much violence, which when you pop out of the mind, you also pop out of time. So I'm not because time is part of a construct of this material reality. So I popped out of it into timelessness, which isn't to say this sort of moment where time didn't hold on. It was actually the end of an experience of time. And so I had, in the same way that you, if I asked you to think of your kindergarten teacher, you could access it. A fully enlightened person who, by my definition of enlightenment, I can actually recall many, many lifetimes in the same way, because I don't have a story of being this human that began at this time and ends at this time. So I can, in the same way, exactly the same way as you remember what you had for dinner yesterday, I can remember what's happening in an alternative, I can remember it, I think most of us can remember them anyways. We get these little, you don't have to be all wooby to actually get that there was a past life, because you have trace elements of it, 3-year-olds spout off funny little things. There's no way they could have picked up, we're used to it. But so that particular veil that said you can't remember these things went away, and it was very, very accessible. So the violence of this life is a mirror of many, many others. And what happens when you wipe out, when the mind filters and you die, is that it all comes out. It dissolves, the pain dissolves, but it doesn't dissolve instantly. It's like it gets reprocessed in the body, and then it gets transformed into its source, right? Into this effortless light, and then vast stillness. So the memories get wiped out, and but you kind of relive them in your body. You kind of have these, or I did anyways, I had huge amounts of it, of just kind of traumas from this lifetime, traumas from other lifetimes. It was about 5 years of fairly extreme horror of just moving through and living through it. Well, it's so much bloodier than the sales pitch.
Yeah, well, and it's so interesting because I remember reading Eckhart Tolle's book, and he talks about sitting on a park bench for 2 years after his experience, and I'm like, okay, so once this happens, how do you learn? You're in timelessness. How do you learn to function? How do you know? Okay, 10:30, I have an appointment, or how do you pay the bills? How do you, how does that?
It's so interesting. It's so interesting because how you do all that is exactly how you did it before. You just have to come from such a different place to do it. And the journey to learn that it's exactly the same takes years and years. Because he talks about 2 years on a park bench. There was another, 5 or 7 years of, there was some homelessness, there was traveling back. I mean, it is insanity. In my definition, I think realizations are extraordinary and beautiful, and we all access them all the time. I think Oprah calls them aha moments, but we all have these insights of clarity. Some people have a much deeper realization where they literally become one with the universe, and it can happen for moments or years or months or anywhere in there. That's all in the territory of realization. It's very easy to think in that realization. It's so natural and innocent to think, oh, this is it. This is enlightenment, or this is, but you actually know when enlightenment happens because you die. And there's nobody has to tell you or confirm with you or check in with you, or you don't need a teacher to just confirm that you died. I mean, it is the ultimate death. That's enlightenment. Bloody, horrible, traumatic, but it can happen. And then what I call the embodiment, exactly what you're talking about. The embodiment is learning how to live this way, which is so much starting from ground zero. And instead of when we are a child and we hear the phone and someone says that's the phone, and you eventually learn to, by the time you're 3, you're leaving little cute voice messages, you understand, you push a button. And so it's almost like you start again, where it's that piece of information moves in a certain way, and I just have to let this respond, and there's kind of this way, and if there's nothing to engage anymore that tells me phone and do this with it, you kind of have to restart, and then when you're in there and you're moving and you're functional, you realize this is the only thing that was ever happened for any of us. Any of us have only ever been answering phones or showing up for 10:30 appointments in exactly the same way. We just think about it differently. You know, with a mind, you go in the back door. Without a mind, you're in the front door. Like but it's the same movement, which is ultimately why I think somebody, you know, like Eckhart Tolle or Byron Katie or any of us in the club, you know, the awakened people, we are constantly showing people how to live much more peacefully and with much more freedom. Because there's nothing that really has to change fundamentally about you. It's just you can access a front door instead of a back door. And in my work, a lot, and I think Byron Katie is a lot the same, and I think Eckhart's the same, is you don't have to do the enlightenment. You don't have to do the whole thing to actually feel how things are authentically moving. And when you have a mind, there's this whole doership. There's this kind of virtual, I am this person, and I have to go get these needs met. And when that drops away, those, you know, we kind of do processes of inquiry or whatever to drop all that stuff away, you are still meeting your husband at 10:30. Like, it still moves that way. But the effort, the profound effort of it dissolves. Mm-hmm. So your life moves exactly the same without the massive story of me who has to do this to make this happen, and me who's failing, me who's worthless, me who's like, those are actually the core belief systems propelling the whole doership. Mm-hmm. And all of that is a misunderstanding. And so how you embody your life is the same way as I embody my life. There's just no doer here doing it.
So there's this whole long process. I mean, enlightenment, when you talk about it, enlightenment sounds horrifying.
It's horrifying. And anybody who truly, truly did it, the real enlightened people, agree across the board. It's horrifying.
It's horrifying. So ideally, and I remember thinking this way back when you were telling me about it 8 years ago, it's like, okay, I really would love to have this sort of awareness and this kind of peace, but I don't want to stop functioning. You know, I have a husband and now I have a child. I want to be able to be a parent. So you have had these 9 years to come to this place of realization, and you're now helping people like Eckhart and Byron, Katie, you're now helping people with your work in sort of finding that place without needing to pop open. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, if you pop open, I'm here for you.
Right.
Nobody knows it better than I do. Or, you know, there's a few of us that know it very, very well, and so we can help you. So if that's, you know, and definitely, I never wanted to teach. That was never a part of what I wanted. And I actually, so most of those 9 years was just my own, learning to live this, learning to embody this. And it happened in the same way all things happen for all of us, really effortlessly, and kind of came up. It was more like, this is the train, get on it, which is so many people coming and asking for support in their life. And it was so clear to me, because I can read from the inside out, you know, where the cross wirings were happening for any, you know, for somebody, and how to simply and very quite practically uncross those wires so they could carry on without suffering and in peace and in freedom. So it's sort of like where the wires are crossed is like your inauthentic pieces, but they're so buried for most of us. How can you see them? You know, and it's a lifetime of looking and, you know, peeling back the layers of the onion in order to find those cross wirings. So it's like a quick, fast way. You can have someone like me who's reading the code, who can just clarify the pieces. So it was never about how to become enlightened or some story. And in fact, it was really terrifying for me to actually even to begin later, many years later, to recognize that people wanted enlightenment, because it was like, you do not want enlightenment. If anybody told you what it really was, you do not want it. If it happens to you, thank God, we live in the kind of a modern age where there's kind of a number of people. You can pick up the phone and get some support and some help if it happens to you. But the sales pitch was horrifying to me. That is like, this is how you find peace. This is how you find freedom. Anybody who's truly awake. I mean, and I have dozens of friends, you know, very, very high level teachers. We all agree on the same thing. Like, it's not essential for your happiness or to end suffering or for freedom. In fact, a great teacher and I, one of the biggest teachers in the world, who's a really close friend. Last night we were talking. And he was saying, we were both agreeing that most people are just looking for freedom and peace, which is so available. And it's just layers of misunderstanding and that are conditioning our suffering. And to unwind that stuff, you are able to do. It's completely within your ability. It's just that there's not really a roadmap of how to do it. There isn't. So that's how my own path to become teaching, it was impelled to do it because I can write the roadmap. You know, I can see it, so I can write the roadmap, which is my new thing, is trying to be that play, you know, stand in that place of, you know, I wrote my first book, Tools for Sanity, which is just in the process of being published, but I've put it out to about a dozen or so folks, kind of cold readers, and said it's a roadmap. There's 4 steps. Take these 4 steps and see what happens. And so across the board, it's been fairly successful about just like getting some really deep clarity and finding new ways to move through your whole life, exactly the way, you know, being a mom, being a wife, being a working person in the world, paying mortgages, earning incomes. Like, how do you do this with much less suffering, much more freedom? Because that's the cool thing, is that when that all dissolves and disappears, you realize the same way you were paying the mortgage is exactly going to happen now, except now it's a lot more peaceful and a lot more easy and a lot less effort. If I don't think I'm the one responsible and I have to make it happen, and then you're stuck in that place because there's a clear lack of skills in the end, because that story is unable to create mortgages. But the same force that's animating you, that's actually creating the breath in your lungs right now, that's, you know, creating, you know, your entire body, is more than capable of paying for a home. It's creating the home, it's creating the paycheck, it's that animating force is massively abundant in every moment and is wildly capable. And that's ultimately how you are paying the mortgage, but you're unaware that the same breath that's being breathed, the same, in this moment, your whole body is saturated in oxygen. You know, you didn't make oxygen. But if you walked around with a story all day saying, how the fuck am I going to get the oxygen that my family needs? You know what I mean? It's like, It's going to hurt because you have no access to create it. There's no ability to create it. And it's not how oxygen's being created anyway. Never was, never will be.
Right.
So it's really unwinding those little pieces inside of you. And it's not even just that, but there's all these sort of core habits inside of you that keep posturing to try to make the oxygen happen every day. And it's really about seeing them and noticing that you can drop it and just let the mortgage get paid. Let the oxygen come in your lungs, you know? Let your hair grow. Let all of this unbelievable abundant life that's around us in every moment happen. Because that's eventually how the functioning happened here, is like, oh, you know, like you can still show up for a 10:30 appointment, because the only thing that ever showed up for a 10:30 appointment was this unbelievable creativity that created the 10:30 appointment in the first place.
Right.
Which is what shows up for it, you know?
And that sounds like sort of the enlightenment pitch, like that sense of letting life move through and not working so hard, not letting go of the struggle. That sounds like what most people really want.
Yeah. Yeah. And the beauty is it's so achievable. It's so available. It's so available. I mean, it's really, really your birthright. It's how you're moving in every moment. There's just this added effort on top of it. it's not, it doesn't take lifetimes or 20 years of sitting on a meditation cushion or memorizing every Rumi poem that was ever written, or having an arsenal of kirtan music or whatever it is that, and all those things are beautiful, like if naturally and effortlessly that's what happens for you, fabulous. But the idea that there's something you have to do that is more effort to find effortless, perfect peace is ridiculous. In its essence, like 20,000 prostrations and sitting in this pose and holding your fingers in this and counting every fucking breath. I mean, I understand that instead of having yourself being basically tortured by this constant mental stream of, for instance, how do I pay the mortgage? It feels more peaceful to then just count your breath, or hold your hands. But you've just replaced effort. You've just shifted your effort. You haven't embodied the peace. You haven't embodied effortlessness. And it is so possible to embody it because it's what you are. It's not like in this moment you're having to breathe and having to really think about it and having to really focus on it, or to find a way to let the oxygen in, hold your mouth like this and do this to let the oxygen in, like it's already coming in.
Right.
Right. And you have so little control. You couldn't stop it if you wanted. You couldn't actually hold your breath until you died. You couldn't. There's so little to do with you in terms of being breathed. Mm-hmm. And so that's how possible your peace is, your freedom is. It's actually here. It's actually happening constantly. It's all the ways that we have this extra effort. And I, of course, know better than anybody because I was so broken. I mean, there was just so much insanity from such a violent upbringing and traumatic multiple lifetimes, I know what effort is. I know what horror is. I know what war is. Yeah, I'm as badass as, the fact that I can survive what I have gone through is, is pretty much as badass as it gets. And the whole time, peace and freedom was there the whole time. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I think for anyone who's interested in, in that, like, how do I find peace and freedom and sort of enlightenment seems like the holy grail of that, which I'm hearing from you is not necessarily the case. Yeah, it's really fascinating. So your book will be out soon, and people can find you at
mysticgirlinthecity.com. Yeah, I currently am running a course that's called 3 Months to Sanity, to kind of give you that peace and freedom tools. And it's basically a call series where I work directly with everybody on the call. It's a weekly call series, but what I love is that you come and you bring your life. Like, how was today? What happened today? Because we move through your life to find your peace and freedom. So that course is running. It's got all kinds of great time zones, so anybody in the world can access that. It's available internationally. mysticgirlinthecity.com. So the book is finished. It's completed. It's beautiful. And it's going to be released the late summer of 2013. So, and there's some meditations and that kind of stuff. So, Tools for Sanity is my boiled down way to get to peace and freedom. To basically know the peace and freedom that's already available to you. So, yeah. All
right. So, I'm going to finish with my last 3 questions.
Yeah.
Which
I love these 3 questions. I love it from your other guests too. It's great. It's really lovely.
So if you could, and this is a funny question for you because, well, anyway, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about the world, what would you change?
Well, I guess it's that, right? It's the amount of effort that we all live with, which is ultimately the root of that is feeling like we need to change. From tiny little subtle levels, like I wish I didn't respond like that to my neighbor yesterday, to big ones of I wish I was 80 pounds lighter, or I wish, I had whatever, $1 million, something like that. The big wanting to change to the very, very, very subtle judgments and wanting to change. If I could wave a magic wand, which is what I'm trying to do with my work, is to shift that pattern. And ironically, when we begin to stop wanting to be different, we actually transform remarkably. Much more access to that $1 million paycheck when we're not condemning ourselves and trying to force ourselves to get there.
Right.
It actually, ironically, when we really, really, really can see and accept what we are foundationally, that sort of stuff comes much more simply, much more effortlessly. So it's sort of not about like just the acceptance of where you are, because I know for most people that's really hard to taste. But just the unwinding of the effort in your life, the amount of effort, that's what I would change. It's a very long answer. But finding ways to move with less effort.
Mm-hmm. That sounds lovely. What brings you the most joy?
God, it's so true. I think my answer is ultimately the same as everybody's, which is those simple, simple moments of harmony in our life. It's that, it's like when I'm working in the garden and there's like some birds that land and my beets grew. My dogs are rolling in the hay, laughing hysterically. Just these simple moments. Everybody on the planet, children's laughter is like the most magical sound in the world. And my neighbors all have 3-year-olds. And sometimes there's this chorus of laughing 3-year-olds. Like there's these moments with it's just the spontaneity of harmony in life. And the magic of doing dishes with my 14-year-old nephew, and he's so chatty and happy that day, And there's just that perfect magic moment of just washing dishes with your family. But I think that's the truth for many of us of what brings us the deepest joys. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So mine's the same.
What is one, aside from having your mind blown wide open, what is one fun or interesting fact about you that makes you uniquely you?
That I can read the code, or that
yeah, exactly.
that I can see what's going on around a mile around me. I think the funniest thing about me that people do not expect is that, I love me a good action adventure movie. So I'm the one in the front row seat with a big Coke Zero watching G.I. Joe 5, The Retaliation. I think that one always shocks people.
Yeah.
They're so easy to have stories about each other, and that's one that people always sort of take a break. It's like, yeah, Fast and Furious 10, I'm in! I'll see it 3 times.
So funny. So
funny. Yeah. So.
Well, and I remember you saying at one point, too, that you love reality television.
Oh, I love reality television. But I love reality television that's transformative, although you can never judge someone on their reality TV fix. It's everybody has some little fix. But mine is the transformation reality TV. I love it. Losing It with Jillian Michaels was just like awesome. It was just like, yum. I actually will watch every episode of The Biggest Loser forever, which is so funny because it's ridiculous, this like weight loss Olympics thing. The whole concept is like unbelievably ridiculous, but the inner transformations are so beautiful. I love, there was a great, amazing show out of the UK by called How to Look Good Naked, which was actually Sook, God, I can't remember his name right now, which is terrible because I love him so much, but his name's gone. But anyways, he's a UK profound humanitarian who walked around and showed women how to love their bodies just the way they are, without any surgery or without it. Just change their mental precepts of their bodies. So you will often find me logging time in front of reality TV watching humans transform because it's breathtaking to me.
Huh.
Yeah. So there's a lot.
I love it. That's great.
Yeah, yeah, which is a lot about this series that you're doing. I love this series that you're doing, interviewing all these women who have done these incredible transformations and have mapped it and processed it. It's really beautiful. I love it. It's very, very inspiring.
Thanks. Yes, and one man so far.
And one man.
Yes.
One man are welcome in.
Yes. He's wonderful. He's so wonderful. So.
Men are wonderful. I am a true lover of men. Absolutely. I like the way they're different from women. I love that, and the way they're the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We the men haven't been organized for personal development the same way women do, but they have access to it, and it's delicious to listen to.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your story. It's an amazing one. And again, people will be able to find you, Kiran, mysticgirlinthecity.com.
Yeah,
and,
if you put Mystic Girl in Google, it's the first one that's going to come up. I'm kind of popular.
That's great.
Yeah, Mystic Girl, you can find me on Facebook for kind of daily inspirations and things like that, too. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's so much for this. Good night.
Bye.